Now, on this part, it'll be a little bit more in-depth, a little bit more technical. So, the statue of Athena in Troy is called the Palladion or Palladium. The statue was made by Athena to honor Pallas. According to Greek myth, the Palladium, or again Palladium, was a wooden statue that Athena crafted specifically to honor and remember her companion Pallas, here the daughter of Triton, after accidentally killing her during a friendly spar or practice fight. And this is one of the versions how Athena got the epithet Pallas. Another one, the one that I prefer, is the slaying of the giant Pallas during the Gigantomachy. Gigantomachy basically means war of the giants. Athena wrapped the sacred Aegis around the statue's breast and placed it beside Zeus to pay it honor in heaven, before it fell down from the sky, falling down here in quotation marks, to help found the city. You see, King Elos prayed to Zeus for a sign while building the citadel, and the wooden statue of Athena dropped directly in front of this tent. So, as mentioned already, I feel like Nolan likes playing with the guilt motive in this video, and hubris and decay of a society from a major war. Now, important, as long as this statue, the Palladion or Palladium, is staying behind the walls of Troy, the city can't be destroyed, as it is under divine protection of Athena, here in her role as a patroness goddess, a protector deity of the city. But if that statue would be replaced outside of that city, no chance, the city will fall. Enter Odysseus and Diomedes. They steal, not destroy, and that is a very important aspect. They steal, not destroy the statue, in order to break the spell of divine protection over Troy, allowing the city to finally fall. In Nolan's adaptation, however, they destroy the statue. And this is a massive issue, as we will see in this video. Original myth: the Trojan War is a tragedy of hubris, but Nolan turns it into a, well, kinda crime scene. And this is nowhere more glaring than in this exact treatment of the city sacking. In Nolan's Odyssey, during the chaotic fall of Troy, Odysseus and his men don't just conquer, they desecrate. They smash, shatter, and entirely destroy the sacred statue, the Palladium, the sacred statue of Athena. And remember, Athena is also the patroness goddess of Odysseus. Odysseus actively prays to Athena, and Athena is the one who guides, helps, and supports him throughout the entire journey, and Telemachus as well. So, on its surface, it is a visceral, cinematic moment designed to shock, and it shocked me a lot when I saw it. Nolan uses this destruction to amplify the horrors of war, cranking up the narrative stakes by dripping every frame in immediate, suffocating guilt. Yet, by shattering the stone visage of the wonderful goddess, my overall beloved goddess Athena, Odysseus isn't just winning a war, but, and that is very crucial, he's actively breaking the cosmic laws of the very deity he prays to. It is an act of blatant disrespect, an insult to the divine, and it sets up Nolan's overarching thesis that this is not a journey about getting home, Nostos, but a, once again, psychological penance for an unforgivable sin. And destroying the statue, the sacred statue of the same deity you pray to, can be seen as an unforgivable sin. So, this creative liberty completely unravels the foundational logic of the original Homeric epic. Well, when I say Homeric, I'm not entirely accurate here. Because in the actual Homeric tradition, Odysseus and Diomedes don't destroy the statue, which is known, again, as the Palladium. They steal it, they sack it, they remove it from its original position, thus destroying the divine protection. But it is not in the Odyssey or Iliad that this actually happened. Once again, like with Sinon, we have another story that is being put into the Odyssey of Nolan. In the lost epic Little Iliad or Ilias Migra, which fills the gaps of the Iliad and Odyssey, sneaking into Troy to steal the Palladium is a calculated tactical necessity. Again, as long as that statue, the Palladium, stands inside of Troy, Troy can't fall because it is under the divine protection of Athena. So, the original Greek logic was pretty clear. Troy could not fall as long as that sacred statue remained inside its walls. So, by taking the Palladium, Odysseus was taking away the divine protection Athena granted over that city. So, to prove it, let's look at the textual evidence from the epic fragments. Mind you, that is more or less a later summary of this, because the original text has unfortunately been lost through time. First, the English version. Then the phantom of Achilles appeared to those at the wall. Afterwards, Odysseus, disguising himself as a beggar, entered the city, having been recognized by Helen, and coming to an understanding with her. He carried off the Palladium, after killing many of the Trojans. Now, the original Greek one. Well, I say original, it's the fragment. Επέτατε, ακεραίος επάσμα, το εισπέριτο τέικος πανέtai. Μέτατε τauta Odysseus, mitas schematistes, eis ptokon, eis archetai, eisten polin. Gnoristes de hypo elenes, kai syntemenos autei, to Palladion, apaire. Volus ton tron anelon. This is a part of the Little Iliad, Ilias Migra, and is usually attributed to Lesches, which came, most likely, decades after the Odyssey. So, most scholars date the poems approximately as follows. First, we have the Iliad, round about 750 to 700 BC. Then we have the Odyssey, about 25 years later, so 725 to 675 BC. Yet, the Iliad is possibly between 700 and 650 BC, maybe even later. Yet, very crucial here, Despite the modern impression that the epic cycle was written to, well, continue Homer, that probably isn't what happened. Unlike with the Golden Apple, that is meant to give an introduction to the Iliad, a reason. I already talked about this in detail. There's a free PDF I wrote in a pinned comment. Many scholars think these poems, so the Iliad Odyssey on the one hand and the Little Iliad on the other, emerged from the same oral tradition. Homer selected one portion of the Trojan saga, the Wrath of Achilles, and one Nostos tale. Again, that means return home or journey home. And for this, he has the Odyssey, hence Odysseus, while poets of the cycle preserved other parts of the legendary tradition. So, the Trojan saga is the wrath of Achilles. The Nostos is the story of Odysseus. In other words, the Little Iliad was probably not conceived as a sequel to Homer, but as another epic within the broader Trojan War tradition that developed alongside the Homeric poems. Some even suggest that the Little Iliad is being attributed to Homer himself as well. But usually it is not in the Iliad or the Odyssey from Homer. So, in terms of composition, the Little Iliad was likely written within about 25 to 75 years of the Iliad, and probably around the same time, or a bit later, as the Odyssey. Again, the exact order remains uncertain because all three poems grew out of a long oral tradition before being written down. Now, if you look at this from a mythological point of view, the Little Iliad begins immediately after the death and funeral of Achilles and continues the story just until before the sack of Troy, Persis. So, the sequence is roughly as followed. We have the Iliad, which ends with Hector's funeral. Then we have the Aethiopis. Here, Achilles kills Penthesilea and Memnon then dies. Then we have the Little Iliad. Here, contest for Achilles' arms. Ajax's death. Philoctetes returns. Neoptolemus arise. And, crucial, the Palladium is stolen and the wooden horse is built. Then, of course, we have the Persis, the sack of Troy. And after all of this, we have the Odyssey. Here, Odysseus' journey home, Nostos. This begins right after Troy has fallen. So, in the story, the Little Iliad bridges the gap between the Iliad and the Odyssey, alongside the Aethiopis and Persis. The original act was a triumph of Metis, which means wisdom and deep counsel. And if you know at least a little bit about the origin of my overall beloved goddess Athena, you know that Metis is the name of the Titan goddess of wisdom and also mother of Athena, before Zeus swallowed her. Anyway, this triumph of Metis is Odysseus' signature cunning. It was a strategic heist to claim divine favor for the Greeks, and certainly not a temper tantrum born of wartime rage, which the Odysseus of Nolan's Odyssey seems to be more in favor of. So, also something. In Homer's epics, the Iliad and Odyssey, we do have Achilles' ghost as well. Here, he only appears in the underworld, and not Xenon, by the way. In the epic cycle, though, Achilles' ghost appears over his grave at Troy to the Greek army. Then we have, of course, the famous spy mission. In Homer's epics, this is mentioned in passing conversation. And again, Xenon is not part of this. In the epic cycle, this is detailed as a major structural plot point. And for this part, very crucial, the Palladium is not mentioned in Homer's epics, Iliad and Odyssey, but in the Little Iliad, it is fully detailed as the catalyst for Troy's fall. Because, again, if that statue, the Palladium, is removed, the divine protection of Athena for its city falters, and is the only way that Troy could fall. So, by now, I hope you understand why Noah's change is such a fundamental problem. A big one. By replacing the theft with destruction, Nolan fundamentally mischaracterizes Odysseus. The mythological Odysseus survives entirely on his intellect and his deep, calculated reverence for my overall beloved goddess Athena. He would never smash her image. He knows the gods holds all the cards. Well, technically, the fates holding the cards, but that's just a little too deep for this conversation here. So, turning him into a sacrilegious vandal strips away his defining trait of cleverness, which Nolan did a pretty good job doing, and replaces it with crude, modern, almost nihilistic kind of behavior. Yet, more importantly, well, let's say equally importantly, it breaks the thematic spine of the story. The original Odyssey is fundamentally about Nostos, Xenia, and the reverence of the wonderful deities. And obviously, that does include following the divine laws, respecting the wonderful deities. And again, Xenia is the sacred law of hospitality, also known as Zeus's law. The trials Odysseus faces on the sea are obstacles which he caused himself due to his rather idiotic behavior towards Polyphemus. So, and those serve as tests of endurance. And again, because he blinded Polyphemus, told Polyphemus who he is, and directly offended Poseidon with that. Already said it, very stupid. But for the Homeric epic, a very crucial lesson. Already talked about this as well. So, Nolan, however, forces the narrative into a journey of guilt, which again, I already talked about as well. And here, with this, it becomes even more evident. Because Odysseus commits an explicit act of divine desecration at Troy. His entire subsequent voyage becomes a literal purgatory, which kinda makes it weird that Athena herself, or his imagine of her, appears to him after he insulted and disrespected her. So, the narrative focus shifts from a hero fighting to return to his family to a broken man being tortured by a vengeful universe for his war crimes. By trying to make the story more grounded, gritty, and drastic, Nolan sacrifices the profound cultural depth of the myth on the art of modern trauma tropes, a psychological journey. He gives us an Odysseus who isn't clever at all, just complicit.